Hey everybody, welcome back to Terminus, the Suttree of Extreme Metal podcast. And as usual, I am the death metal guy with the black metal guy. But today we have a sinister interloper from the depths of the ocean. Who is that harkens yonder? Could that be the infamous Jiub of Radio Free Innsmouth?
It might be.
I'm glad that you're so non-committal about it.
There's a semi-distinct possibility of that being the case.
Yeah. So yes, welcome Jiub of RFI. It's awesome to have.
Jiub.
Yeah, it's awesome to have you on the show because we've talked about RFI on our show a few times. You know, when we got started some years back, RFI was pretty much one of the only sort of podcast-shaped things about extreme metal that we thought was good. Like, because it was just
it was the only one.
Yeah, it was just a barren landscape of like, hell yeah, Borther, let's go fucking talk about a Monomarth type shit. And
you're gonna hate the newest RFI is actually a tier list for every Dissection album.
All three of them?
All three, yeah. It's A, B, and C. You figure out which one goes where.
Well, no, it's actually S for Rian Chaos, and then like...
Oh, god damn it, you're one of them?
Yeah, motherfucker.
Oh, no!
We have critically rehabilitated Rian Chaos on this show.
I would put Storm at number 1, but I'd put Rian Chaos at number 2 for sure.
Fuck yeah.
Stomberlane at number 1.
No, you see?
Oh!
But it's these dynamic opinions that are going to make this episode so exciting.
It's a bit of a Hegelian trialectic.
Yeah, it's a severe
That's like
trauma.
when there's two girls, right?
Yeah, it's two chicks at the same time.
Yeah, no, if I had $1 million, you know what I'd do?
But yeah, it's awesome to have you on the show, man. And like now that you've Jiub, now that you've been on Bunsen Burner and now Terminus, we can truly, assemble, the Megazord of extreme metal podcast journalism.
My next step is to break into J-Dog's house.
I think that's a good play. Yeah,
that's an awesome plan. You just better bring a mic. You better have contact mics on you.
Now I would be like, sir, this new Deicide album, it's not so good, buddy.
It is kind of funny that we appear on each other's shows, though, because the Venn diagram of the listeners for all three of those shows is just a fucking circle. We are not expanding our audiences in any way. This is the worst promotional shit ever.
Occasionally I get some wacky fucking K-pop people from a Visual K episode. That's about it.
Oh, that's gotta be weird. How do you negotiate that?
Like, people talk shit on... I have talked to all sorts of wide variety of internet racists. I've had nothing but positive experiences with the K-pop people. Those very nice Filipinos.
That's good, man. So, real quick, just like to talk about RFI briefly. You and Bunsen Burner tend to stick with older stuff, and we tend to do more new releases. But what gave you the idea of doing these sort of single band deep dives, these kind of like historical documents about them?
I don't really know. Like, the idea for the show was, and you're gonna hate this knowing your history. I really liked the goofy, like, Fenris sort of DVD commentary level, like second discs on the Dark Throne albums. I was a big fan of Patrick from Crypticus used to do this show called Pull the String, where he would talk about like death metal or whatever, and I just sort of combined the two of them, and it ended up going into more deep dive on bands because I've been listening to this shit for too long, and I'm like a giant dork, so I knew too much, and it seemed to be entertaining, and I kind of I don't know, I like talking about metal stuff. That's how it happened.
It's not too far from our origin story.
Yeah, it was basically the same. It was like, God damn, I can't help thinking about this when I'm taking a shit. What am I going to do?
Exactly.
Right? Like,
I'm sitting here, I'm taking a dump, and I'm listening to the alternate versions of various Ildjarn tracks on the that Nocturnal whatever the fuck EP with the blue cover. And they're slightly different than the prior versions on the Strength and Anger album, and I need to tell somebody about it.
I have powerful opinions about Sort Voctor, and someone's going to listen to them. So, hey, once again, awesome to have you on the show, man. Real quick, you want to shill? Where can people give you money and listen to you and, all that shit? Get a lock of your hair.
I don't take any money.
Why not? You should.
I don't know. What am I going to fucking do with it?
Buy records.
Yeah, I could do that. I don't know.
We've changed the whole model.
I mean, I guess I do that a lot. I don't know about the money thing, but yeah, just Radio Free Innsmouth on YouTube. I believe if you do hatebus.libsyn.com, that's the podcast that RFI started out as the interstitial sort of bit for. And then
is that a Gothic King Cobra podcast? Is that the idea?
It has turned into one, except not so much anymore because the boy has been grounded. All right?
I know.
Clint said, "You're not allowed to use the internet anymore, boy."
And Josh, like a good little boy,
like a good little toddler,
would never go against Big Daddy Bicep Clint.
You don't have to go against the grain.
Although I like the guys in Kiwi Farms are suspecting that it's probably Tanis who's really calling the shots there.
I could believe it. I feel like Clint's probably got a bit of a dommy mommy relationship with that woman. Not that I'm not gonna shame anybody about that, but that appears to be what's going on there. And the maternal paternal unit has decided that he is not allowed to podcast anymore. So now we're kind of back to our old standby of talking about news stories where people like jerk off and things of pickles at steakhouses and occasionally saying the N-word.
So obviously classic material for anyone that's a fan of this show as well. So
it's very classy. We also do a stream on Thursdays. It should be linked on the Libsyn thing there.
Nice. And in the notes for this show, we'll have links to all of RFI's various social media and everything. Well, so Jiub is a true DIY old school underground guy. He does it for the scene. But we don't.
Yeah, man.
So if you want to support us, get on social media. Follow me, the Death Metal Guy, on Facebook at Terminus Podcast. Follow the Black Metal Guy on Instagram at Terminus Extreme Metal. And for the most dedicated and the most withering and powerful among you, feel free to subscribe to us on Patreon, where $5 and up gets you access to the Terminus Black Circle, our private Discord server, where we've been talking a lot about books.
What kind of books?
We were talking about Cormac McCarthy for a little while.
Nice.
Like
Child of God?
Yeah, I love Child of God. I'm reading Suttree
Hell
right
yeah.
now. A buddy got me Suttree for my birthday, so I'm working my way through that now.
I never did Suttree. Child of God is I know people think Blood Meridian's fucked up. Child of God's fucked up.
Yeah, well, yeah, the Child of God is, for those of you who haven't read any McCarthy, if you're a death metal person and you like classic American literature, pick up Child of God. It'll,
I would say Child of God and Outer Dark are kind of the two most death metal ones.
Yeah, I gotta get Outer Dark as well. All right, but, before we get to the main meat of our episode, Black Metal Guy, you've got a little aperitif for us. What have you got to show us today?
Yeah, well, this is pretty cool.
It's pretty cool.
So this is the new demo by a new project called Brazen Horde, and the main guy from it asked us to premiere it, which we shall. He was the guitarist and he is the guitarist and main songwriter of Rubazal, who've had a lineup change and have relocated. I believe they're now in Chicago.
That makes sense, because you said this was produced by one of the Finn fellas.
Yes, this is mixed and mastered by Dan Klein, the ex-Finn drummer at Iron Hand Studios. But yeah, so the main songwriter of Rubazal has relocated and has started this new project, Brazen Horde. And it's pretty cool that we get to premiere it here. We're also going to upload the whole demo on the Terminus YouTube channel to actually do a premiere in the style of the premiere channels, which is not something we're going to do regularly, but once in a while when the right band comes along. So So what's interesting about this death metal guy? You once told me when we did the Paimon Gate review, I think the first one, you had a funny point, right, about like where's the line between Paimon Gate and Pro Sanctus and Fairy, and you talked about like how the sense that this guy basically started. It's like if you start a band like Pro Sanctus with this really strict aesthetic concept, then what happens when you start writing stuff that falls outside that concept, right? Pro Sanctus expanded and became pretty elaborate and technical almost when it started out as sort of brutal Profanatica worship, right?
Yeah.
And then he sort of had to backtrack and start another band called Paimon Gate to restart at the origin, which it was almost like he needed to form another band to do what Pro Sanctus was originally for. And I think that's what's going on here. Brazen Horde, in a lot of ways, sounds like the old Rubazal stuff. So basically, I guess it's Rubajal, I think, but the Rubajal EP was this just the best American take on Slav Black I've ever heard. It was the guitar style had these huge ringing Sanko chords. But there was also this sort of loping Graveland rhythm to everything, and it was slowed down even further to have this almost doomy swagger, like Memory and Destiny Graveland pushed even further. And it was one of my favorite releases of, nowadays stuff. And the Rubazal full length was a bit of a sidestep. It kept that core, but injected a lot more kind of glorious Arghoslentian early Amon Amarth style lead stuff, and made something that was in many ways a lot more accessible in a good way. Like the death metal guy, when we listened to it, said sounds like it would play well at Wacken.
Yeah, I really like that record a lot.
Yeah, so it was sort of a step out from the shadows. For me, it was a bit of a disappointment because I had been so invested in the sound of their first EP. That's not to knock the second, the full length. It just was a bit different from what I was expecting, right? And there were some things I really liked about that old stuff. Not just the sort of the raw approach, but the full length had this mood that was kind of like gloomy, this sort of melancholy yearning for past majesty, which it did very much on purpose. But what I really liked about that, the old Rubazal stuff, it was very affirmative, not really in the triumphant way that's become popular now, but more just it felt inexorable, it felt like listening to nature. And so that was really cool. It was one of the most inhuman sounding records I've heard, from any new band at least. So this new stuff, sort of this Brazen Horde demo, retraces it to the early Rubazal stuff with the sort of Gravelandian primitivism. However, with some important changes. So in his message to me, he told me that this sound is supposed to be more focused on the Polish scene than Rubazal ever was. So I think what he means is Temple of Full Moon stuff, probably including bands. Yeah, probably including bands other than Graveland, which I honestly don't know well. I focus so much on
little Velas action, maybe.
Maybe, and maybe some of the more keyboardy stuff too from that scene.
Like Thy Worshipper and whatnot. All right.
Maybe, yeah. I think Jiub, you will be a good resource on this. And then
I was going to ask you real quick. Can I utilize the phrase Sanko chords in my own conversation?
Absolutely. We'd encourage it. Yeah.
It's a fun one. I like that.
We'll spread them. But the sort of, and then the mood it's less inhuman than the old Rubazal stuff, but it's a bit sort of brighter, but it has that affirmative drive to it that you got on the old Rubazal stuff. So it'll be interesting to try to pick apart what makes this new, and also ways that it is faithful to the origin of these projects. So the first track, we're going to just do a simple first 2-minute sample. Basically, this is Northern Blood, and we'll see what you guys think. Guys, what do you make of that?
That's pretty fucking cool. I like that. I like that they're bringing back the utterly totally fucked reverbed vocals. We need to bring that back.
Yeah, those were pretty Darkin-esque.
He's got a powerful bellow.
Yeah, but no, that's really cool. And then I think Jiub will know better than either of us. But yeah, definitely Temple of Full Moon stuff. I might know.
Mostly Graveland though. You're right on with that. When you talked about
that's a classic Graveland melody. Right?
Yeah, when you were talking about the Senko riffs before they started layering on the part right before the the part before that. If you want to know what a Senko riff is, go back. That's a Senko riff.
Yeah,
that particular sort of like harmony, the way the chords were layered there.
Which one are you talking about? So the main riff is
the transition part between that and then the bit between that kind of melodic staircase.
Oh, between that and the chorus. I see.
Yeah,
interesting.
Yeah, that's the Senko part.
Yeah, those big washes of heavily harmonized I hear 4-string chords.
Yeah, I hear it. Yep.
You don't know what a Senko chord is? There you go. Now you know what it is. Congratulations.
But no, that is really cool, and it's interesting to hear these guys, because I wasn't familiar with the first Rubizol, but you can kind of tell that they would have this in them. You know what I mean? But no, I think that's really, really neat. That really takes me back. This sounds very authentic to that mid-90s style in a way that's
down to the choral patches they were using.
Oh yeah, that's those are One Road to Asa Bay keys.
Yeah, it's it's
I was gonna say that dude, that shit was that was straight up Countess almost.
Oh,
I like those noises.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, Countess uses those really weird old cheap synth patches.
I always I hear that and I'm like, dude, it's the Countess keyboards. That's my shit, man. I fucking love those. Like Hymns to the God of Yore type stuff.
Yeah, no, the patches are sick. And yeah, this song is the main melody is pretty similar to one of the tracks on the first Rubizol, and generally I'd say this is pretty representative of the vibe on that EP.
I think I need to fuck with some Rubizol because I like this.
Yeah, you should check out the EP. And the full length is great too. You know, it has other things that we like, you know, glorious war metal leads, which we get a bit of on the chorus on this track, but it's much more understated, right? You know, you have kind of a chorus thing with some cool lead work under it towards the end of the sample. But yeah, this has that kind of bulldozer wall of mountains feel that their old stuff had. Now,
it's definitely very Slavonic.
Extremely Slavonic, extremely heathen. So now, here's an interesting thing. One cool thing about the old Rubizol is that it also sounds very American. You can really hear them transferring the Slavonic aesthetic to the wilds of Alaska, which is where they were originally from. And you hear something about just the kind of the raw desolation of the American West and North. This track, in a different way, this second one, also feels very American. But to me, it seems sort of inflected by a lot of contemporary USBM. Or does it? Or is it, rather? Like, I'd be curious to hear what Jiub thinks.
It said, or is it?
Oh, wrecked. Oh, fuck.
I mean, as far as like the U.S. Thing goes on that first one, I picked up an American style towards the end. Like the melodies were a little more, I don't want to say demonstrative, but they were, I guess, demonstrative. Yeah, like
it was more like Galal riffing. Yeah.
Yeah, well, they weren't. You know, not to insult any of my European comrades out there, they weren't fucking around as much. The melody comes in a little bit more directly at the end of that first track we were putting on. It wasn't. You wouldn't hear that kind of thing on a Graveland album. You would kind of dance around it a little bit more, if that makes sense. But I got that. Yeah. Bold American heavy metal.
Yeah,
bold. Guitar. There's a good word for it. Yeah.
So, speaking of bold, this is another one that I think feels even more American. This is, although it appears to be about the Teutonic Knights, this is Glory Under the Teutonic Banner.
Well, that's not very Slavonic at all. They didn't like those fellas.
for me, some of those melodies could be a bit on the sentimental side, but what makes it work is that the Slavonic sprawl, especially in that last bit.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting that you were talking about.
I just came back in. I was still vibing to that. Sorry.
Yeah, nice.
It happens. So it was interesting that you were talking about USBM, because really what I thought while listening to that is this is what happens if you took a Winterfilleth record that's designed for 45 and you play it on 33.
You're right. It does sound like Winterfilleth.
Yeah, I can hear that.
Yeah, just slowed down, sort of made more stately.
Right.
But that still kind of intersects with USBM, because like I always talk about Winterfilleth as like being heavily derived from like, you know, this subtle but persistent like US melodeath and metalcore influence.
Yeah.
So it feeds into that, or it feeds into
Well, I also think. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, just the sort of interrelation of those ideas. I'm not sure where it's coming from exactly, but you can associate it with a lot of things.
Well, I feel like Winterfilleth were really sort of ahead of the game on a bunch of ideas that have been arrived at, maybe independently in the nowadays underground, right?
Yeah.
Nowadays, right. I think a lot of the kids doing the sort of outlaw rock stuff might kind of poo-poo Winterfilleth as commercial, but if you put on that Svart Raven riff, right,
fucking
or
rules, dude.
You know, yeah. The Glorious Plain or whatever. Those are some awesome sort of bright sun Senko chords, and so I could definitely hear that being a presence here.
I was gonna say, yeah, no, you like the Temple of the Full Moon thing there is still there, but a lot of Senko-ish shit. This one was even more Senko-y. Very
You're right.
Ukrainian or Russian, like kind of the shuddering walls of melodic guitar, sort of like shimmery, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in your notes, I don't know if you're ready to get to this yet, but you had asked, is there a Graveland Temple Full Moon band that does this? I don't know if this band was associated with the Temple of Full Moon or not, but y'all know Guntina Cree, I think is how you say it.
Gotina Cry or whatever.
I've never really listened to them, but some people I knew spoke highly of them.
They have a very, especially on the Wellowy demo. Nowadays, Guntina Cree is doing this like wacky Prometheus era Emperor shit, which is also kind of fun. But on their first couple demos, they were tapping into that same sort of atmosphere a whole lot. That kind of it's sunny but still sort of melancholic, and it's got a very specific melodic character to it. I don't know if they were Temple of Full Moon, but I think like they were. Like they had plenty of sun wheels on their discs and whatnot. They were probably
this also literally sounds like Druid, the sort of bright mood in Druid.
There's a lot of
right?
Druid.
Sun wheel
Druid.
and Druid. Right.
Yeah. And there's also, I think it's also worth mentioning that there's a lot of stuff from that sort of part of black metal, you know, the sort of Polish into Ukrainian scene that will have weirdly sentimental moments like that. I'm thinking of like shit that nobody cares about anymore, like moments on like Kataxu or Blood of Kingu or something. Like,
who doesn't care about Kataxu anymore?
Kataxu definitely has that sort of more sentimental parts. Yeah.
Everybody should care about Kataxu.
Everybody should, but Jiub, we don't live in a fair world.
Oh my god.
This is Old One Gash, and you're listening to Terminus.
All right, and we are back from talking more about Kataxu in the interlude to bring you our first full-length review of the night. This is the long-awaited return of a band with high quality control and few full-length releases. This is Led Astray by Crucifier on Iron Bonehead. So, I feel like Crucifier is a band that has only recently, that was originally like a sort of a secret handshake band between Anusite dudes, right? Like Anus and Death Metal Underground, like old school death metal elitists would have known this, and people who were really into GBK and Arghoslentian might have known this because Crucifier is the main band of the Black Lord of Crucifixion, former GBK vocalist. However, for me, I had no idea about this band until
I know
pretty
nothing
recently.
about Crucifier.
And which is funny because you're a huge GBK fan.
Yeah.
But I knew nothing about this band until pretty recently when the guys from Bunsen Burner, one of the guys from Bunsen Burner, Paul, who's a patron of ours, asked us to review a Crucifier record. I think Stronger Than Passing Time, but in the end that review didn't materialize. Review didn't materialize because we were lazy shits. But so I only really knew about it from the Bunsen dudes, and then since then I've heard more and more about Crucifier, especially from say the death metal shit posting channel, who's got some spicy Kaz Grant memes.
He likes buns.
And he cannot lie. But it seems like Crucifier has gotten a higher profile lately because there's been this intense groundswell of interest in the Galal bands, in GBK and Arghoslentian. So, Jiub, I think you know way more about this band than we do. Can you please tell us about Crucifier?
So that's kind of the thing with Crucifier is a lot of people, they'll almost see them as like a GBK adjunct project when they're really not.
Right.
Like, people are like, oh, that's, like, Jalal plays guitar in this band. He's not even actually on this album, like, playing anything on the recording. He's like a live guy.
Mm-hmm.
Crucifier is, like, old as shit. Like, I believe they're older than both Arghoslentian and GBK. They go back to, like, 91. And if you look at, like, the thank you list of their first demo, they're like, big shout out to Morpheus Descends and Ripping Corpse. Like, they came out of that. So there's sort of a weird bridge between the Arghoslentian GBK world and, like, more normal underground death metal world, if that makes sense.
Like, Nunslaughter.
They even did a split with Nunslaughter.
Well, everyone did a split with Nunslaughter.
Wow.
But I think it's, yeah, even, didn't, like, GBK or Arghoslentian do that at one point? I'm surprised they haven't gotten in trouble for that.
Probably.
Somebody's going to try and cancel fucking Nunslaughter.
That mid-tempo Celtic Graveworm, is that the name? Did a split with Nunslaughter, and those guys. He was friends with he was friends with Galal and all those guys.
Yeah, him and Jalal Necrosodomy actually shared a post office box.
Yeah, I always love that trivia, and they like got confused for each other.
Yeah. So, but yeah, no, the Crucifier it's like the weird bridge between early 90s, super underground, kind of outside of the New York death metal and Floridian death metal scenes type death metal, and the whatever the fuck GBK Ghost Slent Armored Angel Core stuff is.
Mm-hmm.
They did a fuckload of demos, even though they started, I want to say like 1990 or something. Like, they're old. They're super old, and they didn't get a full-length album out until 2003. And they've only got the 3 albums and then a whole bunch of just EPs and demos and shit, and I own all of it. And honestly, and you can't tell any of the racist people this, but I think I might like them a little bit more than GBK and Arghoslentian, but only because it appeals to a very particular sort of East Coast death metal autism that I'm in possession of.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No.
So what do you mean by East Coast death metal as opposed to New York death metal?
It's almost, it might even, you can almost call it like Virginian death metal, like early Deceased, like Corpus Rodis, Abominog, Morbius kind of shit.
Yeah, that is a weird scene. It's always like in kind of conjunction with the New York scene, but it is its own thing.
Yeah, it's like the bridge out from the New York death metal scene into the larger death metal scene. I believe Crucifier is actually from Pennsylvania, but they always struck me as very Virginia-ish in how they sound, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's kind of a limited Richmond scene you could make an argument for.
Yeah. So they did all these demos. They got the 3 albums, and like they put out an album once in a fucking blue moon. I think this was actually the shortest wait between full lengths that they've done.
And that's 6 years.
Yeah, as opposed to 2018, 2003, and then 1991 demo.
So with that being said, since you're kind of the aficionado here, what do you think of the new one?
I liked it. I thought it was cool. It kind of followed up on their last album before this one, Thy Sulphur Throne on High, the one with the Mark Riddick cover. That one really leaned into the weird kind of floaty guitar sound. This one went even farther with that, and then it had the bass guitar is really prominent on this album, which is I found to be rather exciting. And I think it's because they got back. So Crucifier's always been like the Kaz Grant band, but there was this other guy named Spencer Madman Murphy that was with him for the latter half of their demo era, and then their first full length, and a couple EPs after that, but not their second full length. And he did bass, and he split the songwriting pretty evenly with Kaz Grant on this one. So it kind of unified a few different eras of this band, if that makes sense. It's probably a good entry point for people that like aren't into Crucifier. You just go get fucking Led Astray off Iron Bonehead.
Yeah, this is very interesting. This is a weird fucking record. Like,
it's odd.
I don't know if it would seem less weird if I was more acquainted with the discography. I did go back in prep just because I was so unfamiliar, and I listened to the 2003 album, which is like not really my thing, but I can see
that one's a lot closer to Arghoslentian.
Yeah, it's also just a lot. I don't know, just sort of like we're just doing a death metal record, folks. You know, it ain't much, but it's honest.
The other thing about that one is that one's got a lot of them doing like redos of songs that they had been demoing since like 1992.
Yeah, that can be good, or it can make things a little choppy.
I think it worked really well on the opening track. What was it, Sodomy of Angels? That one, it works well. Some of the other ones, I kind of prefer the demo versions better. Their first demo, what the Humans Are Such Easy Prey. That's like an essential bit of weird U.S. death metal / black metal, but back from a time when like people called U.S. black metal like Vital Remains or something.
Yeah,
way back.
Yeah.
Like that era of black metal is kind of what it came out of.
That like early 2000s weird era.
Well, not even that. Like back in the late 80s.
Oh, you mean like early Vital Remains?
Yeah.
Like In Cold Darkness or In Cold Dimness, whatever the fuck it's called.
Yeah, like Into Cold Darkness, or like when people were into the Michigan bands like Masochist and Wind of the Black Mountains and whatnot, like that weird early.
I like how you say when people were into that. That's just fucking nearly 40-year-old men with autism, and like 24 of them. Nobody's talking about fucking Wind of the Black Mountains.
I'm gonna do an episode on them someday. I gotta get better acquainted with the rest of the Masochist demos. It's gonna happen. I swear.
Wind of the Black Mountains is popular with meme pages because of that one liner note.
Oh yeah,
that one photo.
Oh,
Wind of the Black Mountains is actually awesome though.
Yeah,
were they the ones that he like painted the black on the over the corpse paint on his mustache, or was that as?
There's a photo of there's like a liner photo of him swiving a wench while I think smashing a 40.
Yeah, hell yeah.
She's like bent over the drum set. It's one of the most in a few moments in a metalhead's life, we feel like we inhabit that moment. He lived it for all of us.
It's the prosperity gospel.
I mean, you seen the cover of that first Wind of the Black Mountains album? Like that is
it rules.
That is a Kaz Grant appreciatory level worthy butt, and she's offering.
That's true. That is
whatever dark power to that floating goat head. Like, that's good stuff.
Yeah. So Crucifier, Led Astray. So I've got an idea about this record, real bong rippy thing. And I don't know if this is going to jive, Jiub, with like what you think of the prior material, but this is my sort of read on it. I think the idea here is essentially that you can almost call like the taxonomy of a metal band, like the high level taxonomy. There's only really two parts. There's like a structural idea and there's a riffing idea. And then I think that what happens on this record is that the decision was made that the chassis that all of this is going to inhabit, the fundamental structure is basically Profanatica, early primitive sort of U.S. Black Death stuff. But then within that context, they've inserted this array of different riffing styles that have all been sort of stripped down and simplified to a degree to fit that structure. But sort of what you're hearing on this record is like a record collector pastiche of like just a ton of different ideas throughout death and black metal history that are inserted into these frameworks. Like, a lot of the riffs on this record sound like other bands, and I think they're specifically supposed to. I think you're supposed to sit here and you're supposed to be like, oh, that's the bolt thrower riff, that's the sarcophago riff. You know, it's a really interesting experience because there's a lot of really odd, contrasting melodic ideas, but inserting them into this context of like stripped down early US Black Death stuff, it sort of makes even these disparate ideas hang together in a way that's like a lot more naturalistic than you might expect. That was sort of my read on this. It was like I was playing Record Collector Nerd the whole time. It's like, oh yeah, that's this band, that's this band, but they managed to reframe these ideas in a way that I find pretty interesting.
That's a pretty good summary of what they're about. It kind of mirrors their lyrical content. If you actually go through the booklet and like read their lyrics, it's like if you took Profanatica style, like ultra blasphemy, ultra offensive type shit, but then did it with like a really verbose, almost like 90s melodeath, sort of like early In Flames, William Wordsworth lyrical pen. You took it to that. That's where their lyrics have come from, and that's kind of where their music comes from, where like there's a lot of like Acheron and Profanatica and whatnot, but then he's bringing in all these. There's a lot of like doom metal to it. There's a decent amount of like trouble going on at some points, which is kind of funny given that they're an intensely satanic band.
No, that's interesting, and that actually kind of leads back to something that we talk about sometimes on the show, which is like how, at least in my read, like a lot of these like primitive Black Death bands, especially like even like newer Zoomer stuff, ends up sort of accidentally sounding like trad doom a lot of the time.
Yeah, there's a lot of doom. There's a lot of what I would call, if I'm not mistaken, this was a Brett Stevens term, like a train wreck riff type thing during the more dissonant moments. Running into the doom, and like the especially in the solos, like the soul of it has this melodic heavy metal type thing going on.
Yeah, this is a very like leather jacketed heavy metal band at its heart.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this record is for sure built on a chassis of necrotic 80s death metal and the kind of, as you say, the kind of black metal that is a type of death metal, as Ledney put it. Right? Yeah, so I hear what you mean about just the basic structural setup being Profanatica songs. And along with that, just a lot of the most primitive ripping death metal, pre-90s stuff. I mean, I gotta feel like Possessed is big for Crucifier.
Yeah, that
right?
makes sense.
Like, it has that kind of, like, upper mid-tempo. It's, Possessed is ripping, but not, like, Slayer or Dark Angel ripping. And it's kind of, From what I remember, it's not that. Well, actually, Dark Angel isn't that speedy either.
They fucking are a lot of the time. They're fast.
Dark Angel's pretty quick,
but they have a bunch of. I guess what I mean is they have a bunch of huge mid-tempo sections that are like big on this. But fair enough. Okay, so then maybe I'm right the first time. Basically, like Possessed sort of like rumbles ahead like a faster Venom, and Crucifier kind of operates at those tempos too.
There's a thing to note with Dark Angel. So how well do you know your Dark Angel?
I like the first one.
Yeah, I'm kind of the big Dark Angel guy.
So there was another band in the 80s called Viking, and it was everybody from the second and third Dark Angel. It was their band before Dark Angel. Okay. Crucifier, they're very obscure. Crucifier actually covered them on the Trampled Under Cloven Hooves EP.
That's nice.
And the way they did it, because I didn't fucking know Viking before this. And the way they did it, I just thought it sounded like another Crucifier song. So that's a pretty good indicator of where they're coming from as far as influence. Like obscure, like pre-modern death metal and black metal almost. It just kind of taken forward.
Yeah, I can hear Dark Angel on this for sure. And I think I read an old interview with him where he just name dropped a ton of just primitive death and black metal and thrash, right? So, but yeah, Possessed.
Like I wouldn't be surprised if you got Kaz Grant in the room somewhere, he'd be like, dude, I fucking love violence. Like I feel like he listens to a lot of the really intense kind of thrash where you can count the beats and riffs per minute or whatever. I feel like that was a big influence.
So speaking of which, this one really reminds me of a kind of Master or Death Strike riff.
Oh, fuck yeah.
So this is the second to last track, but it is one of the most stripped down, nasty, aggressive death metal tracks on the record. So I thought we would start with that, and then your guys' samples, we get into more ways that this skeleton is fleshed out. So, but first, the skeleton. This is Harbingers of Apollyon. And the solo keeps going.
Yeah, I was like, can we just listen to the rest of that? It's a good song, actually. Good band, actually.
Yeah, I mean, that's undeniably sick, I think, for anyone who likes this kind of music. But so the way this is structured, it's driven just by a 1-2 hardcore or Slayer beat or simplified D beat.
Yeah, you wrote in the notes, "Pay to Die."
Yes,
by Master. I could.
Yes.
I never thought about the Master connection, but that's definitely there.
Isn't "Pay to Die" also on the Death Strike record?
It's a Master song and a Death Strike song, and I believe also a Funeral Bitch song somehow. It's confusing.
It's basically the same band. I just really like saying the phrase "Death Strike." It's up there with
a much better band name than Master.
Yeah, Master's good. It's definitely ambitious, but Death Strike is the kind of thing that, like Gorgoroth, you can just murmur to yourself. You should have stuck with
the Death Strike. That's a band name right there, man.
That's a band name, and the guitar
put
tone.
Some hair in your testicles, goddamn.
Yeah, the guitar tone on that record is also just killer. So yeah, basically what we mean is primitive death metal that's basically discharged with slightly longer riffs and even nastier dissonance. And you get that. And although Death Strike is more power chord, right? Crucifier turns it into single string trem, but it's the same kinds of crushingly dissonant intervals.
I will say Crucifier are too talented of musicians to straight up be like a Death Strike type band.
Sure.
Sense.
Yeah. This is like
technically complex.
It's a little more nimble, right?
Yeah.
That's sort of like hot, sort of that hot like rolling syncopated single string shit, and so. you get that, and then you think, oh, surely they're going to play a different beat. But no, the second riff is also just gnarly, crushing dissonance over a D beat. And then finally, for the solo, you think, oh, maybe some blast beats, grandiose doom slowdown. Fuck that! Right? That's a Dark Angel or sort of slower Slayer song, downbeat
with the Iomi two-finger trill going on in the background. Type shit.
Yeah. So and the guitars kind of split apart there in a cool way.
So something that's interesting about this is like, getting to that idea of sort of reconfiguring things. So the opening riff of this track is like very Profanatica, that like super angular, dissonant, unhummable thing. But you'll notice that like the note switches are like a little swung and syncopated in a way that Profanatica would never do, because Profanatica is everything is like rigidly on that grid. That's part of the weird industrial quality they have. So in a way, like a lot of these songs are structured like thrash songs. Like riffs will be structured like thrash riffs with that little bit of like syncopated groove, even when it's high speed. And especially in the way that the songs are really oriented around like getting to big solos. Like the solo is pretty much the climax of every track. I think every single track has like a big lead or two. And that just seems to be like, and we're talking about like old thrash. We're talking about like 1984 thrash, where it was still, it still had like the distant memory of hard rock in it, and the idea of things being oriented around like a song is built to get to a massive climactic solo part. But it's really interesting hearing that structure being used in this like really stripped down Death Black context.
It's pretty cool thinking about just two old buddies writing this record and just taking turns shredding. Hey, you want to do a solo now, man? You want to do a solo? Okay, sure. Yeah, hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
That's pretty much what this record is, because it, despite the fact they have like a full lineup nowadays with the Grand Belial's key guy, this whole album is just Kaz Grant and Madman Murphy. And this was I think this was a Kaz Grant song.
Yeah, this has a sort of like, rehearsal room in the basement quality to it. Two
like
guys jamming
they're
out.
so intense with that the album before this one, the one with the Mark Riddick cover, that has two versions of the opening song as the opener and closer. One has Kaz Grant playing the solo, and one has the other guy playing the solo.
Sick! I love that. I love that idea.
Yeah,
it's the same exact song. It's just like, I want to do the solo like this. I want to do it like that.
Well, that's like Slayer's insistence on crediting, right? Solo King, Solo Hanneman, Solo King.
Yeah, like they don't go full on like Carcass where they like name the solos, but it's.
I was gonna say we need to bring that back. Can we get back into naming? That's like
where it'll say like necrotic ossuation of whatever the fuck,
putrid innards or whatever.
The solos have individual names.
Yeah, if you go into the
that's sick.
Especially on Necroticism was like the album where that was huge. Like every solo has like its own song title, and it'll say like who did it and whatnot, like the Amit solos versus the Bill Steer solos.
That's so awesome.
Wacky.
That should have been just a thing in metal, that we name our solos. That's so sick. It's the single coolest thing Carcass ever did, actually.
Trey did that too. Azagthoth, it like if you look at like the liner notes to Heretic, it'll be like everlasting explosion of effervescent cichlid lava or whatever the fuck.
Oh yeah. Well, it was just it always had lava at the end though.
It always had lava. He was, love of lava. That was the bonus disc.
Yeah, I remember it. I can't say fondly, but I remember it. Okay, let's get to another song. So getting back to the idea of like recontextualizing stuff in this context. Now, so obviously these guys are two dudes from the old school, and this record is oriented around like a worship of a lot of ideas from the 80s and early 90s. But it's not really limited to that, because these guys are still listening to newer black and death metal.
Oh yeah.
And just kind of what I was expecting from this record was something a little bit more down the middle, a little bit more similar to Profanatica, Nunslaughter, what have you. But there's all these weird melodic touches that really add an additional dimension to it. And
that's kind of a wacky thing about Kaz Grant. If you look through like all the bands that he's been in, he's always been very, I don't know if I would say like scene focused, but he would do like a weird like rack band. He had a band that only did like one demo way back in the day that had like a Wolf's Angle cover, and it sounded like a really raw, shitty version of Graveland in like 1999.
Ooh. Oh, I gotta dig that up.
I can't even remember what it was called. It was like he had like a weird like dungeon synth, but it was only clean guitar, and it was before anybody said dungeon synth. He had a thing like that.
Nice.
Like he seems way more connected to like whatever new things are going on in the scene at the time than like the GBK guys ever were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
If that makes sense.
Yeah, he
cool.
seems less like hostile to Northern European black metal, for instance.
Yes. Yeah.
And speaking of which, let's listen to what happens when guys from that sort of ultra old school are listening to newer Franco-Finnish black metal. Let's hear Crucifier's take on Sargeist.
Franco-Finnish. I like, you know.
Yeah, very.
I'm liking your lingo, Ringo.
So this is a song where we're not 100% confident on the pronunciation, but probably Buyers of Catholic Bones.
Like Biers.
Yeah, you gotta lay those buyers on the pyres.
Yeah.
All right, we'll go.
I always thought it was Buyer. I don't know. What a fucking cool song title. I'm sorry.
All right, play it. All right, so we open with.
Oh, it's done. Oh,
yeah. We
Jesus.
can't give him everything, man. We
what a
got.
good album. Yeah, you know, I don't want him coming after me for like legal action or whatever.
I'm sure it hasn't happened.
I'm Kaz Grant. You played my whole album on that fucking episode, you ding dong.
The Black Lord of Litigation.
Oh no.
Oh man, so we open with another kind of like angular Profanatica.
I was gonna say
riff.
that was a total Profanatica riff. That
Oh yeah, yeah, and kind of like every song sort of opens with one of those.
It's almost it's like mechanistic, like this chromatic ass riff with a super fucking like whatever drum beat under it. It feels like a computer did it in a good way.
Yeah, it's that's something that always interested me about Profanatica and like Ledney stuff in general. Is this like weird industrial quality to it?
Yeah,
the
and
man.
like I bet you if you told Paul Ledney that to his face, he'd call you a faggot. But
oh, not at all. Because I talked to Paul Ledney. I played with him one time, and we got to talking about like Havohe for a long time, and we were talking about industrial music and shit. He was
he calls it Havohe?
I call it Havohe because I think it just sounds cooler than Havohedge.
I always called it Havohedge. That was like the first record I ever bought online with my own money when I moved out of my parents' house when I was like 17 or whatever. I went on Hell's Headbangers and got Dethroned the Son of God from Hell's Headbangers.
It's still arguably the coolest album ever made.
It's a fucking sick album.
So
I love that album.
But so anyway, so we start with the Profanatica riff, but then we get into like this Finnish stuff, and
yeah,
you know, the second riff is sort of plausibly kind of a GBK riff, but then that big sort of like depressive melodeath thing that comes in, you know, the one that plays under the solo, that's just a Shoutrog riff, 100%.
I never thought about that, but you're right. Like
it really,
yeah.
I was resistant to that conclusion, but with that third riff, yeah, like the sort of the speed metal lick over it is not very. I mean, that's like a speed metal lick. However, there were a few kind of licks like that on "Let the Devil In." And the title track, right, as Jiub pointed out while we were listening, and the chords, right, you just have that sort of, that warm guitar tone playing full chords under it, sliding, you know, those sliding 2 or 3 string chords. Yeah, that's basically a Sargeist riff, for sure.
Yeah.
But not even just Sargeist, like just straight up Let the Devil In type shit.
Yeah. And I think it's really cool to hear that sort of stuff recontextualized in such a weird format for it.
I'm almost thinking that it's like a Convergent Evolution type thing where he might not even be into Sargeist, but I think that the Sargeist fella and the Crucifier guy are both so into this old school heavy metal and combining it with that weird 80s black thrash death melange or whatever the fuck you want to call it, that it just ends up sounding like that. But he could also just be into Sargeist. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, like, either one's possible, but I think that what makes this album kind of exciting is, like, this process where this is a really cool record, but the coolest thing about it is the sort of meta conceit of, like, oh, all bets are off, and we can create this structural chassis, and we can put anything into it. Black Metal Guy, it's sort of like when I was talking about the guitar ideas on that last Gridlink record. The idea that he could convert anything into a Gridlink riff,
right.
like with his own idioms.
Old Tasafumi Makabara.
Dude, that guy's a fucking monster.
What a cool guy.
But yeah, so
also great album cover. Not playing into any of my fetishes at all.
Yeah, so but I like that idea. So we've got this template, and we can just start slamming cool riffing ideas into it, and you get something that actually feels considerably different than any of the Origin material.
I think part of the thing that makes it different is an understatement to it. Mm-hmm. Everything gets Kaz and the other guy. Wait, what's his stage name? Is Madman. Kaz and Madman. That's a great name. Okay, Kaz and Madman are sort of they're taking these riffs from primitive thrash and death and heavy metal and Sargeist and stuff, and they're like filtering them down to the number of notes and kind of rhythms that you would get on this sort of like 93 or earlier American Black Death stuff. Like, those are definitely Sargeist riffs, but they're not long and flowing like a Sargeist riff. Many of the things on this record that have the more sort of noble consonant melody, and there are many of those parts, they always have more of the form of like a rough-hewn USPM riff, like a Manila Road thing, rather than say a elaborately unfolding 24-bar Galal riff.
Yeah.
These are not flowing melodies. It's all within the format of ripping death. And so you can have those big melodic parts, but they're they still have to rip, and they're pared down to the bare minimum required to make the statement.
Yeah, they have to function within the conceit of the sort of restricted structure that's been chosen. Jiub, what have you got for us? Because you've got a sample that's going to show off another side of this record that's also very important.
So this Kaz Grant fella, given that he's a big fan of large posteriors on women, it makes sense he would be into doom metal, rather.
Is that how it works? Right. You like big asses, so you're into doom?
I mean, they're kind of thick, you know?
I mean, it does apply for me. I like both those things a lot, so...
I'm a big fan of both of them. I think it's a good time. There's a massive doom metal component to Crucifier. I don't know if it showed up too much in either of your guys' clips, apart from the very beginning of the solo on the last one, which also shared a lot of aesthetic similarity with the solo during the slow part on Foul Parody of the Lord's Supper, the first song on the first Grand Belial's Key album, which has Kaz Grant on it. That that weird like harmonic minor thing he was doing or whatever, but there's a big doom metal component to Crucifier, and in fact he had probably his second most active project was called Hearse, and he called it funeral metal, not funeral doom metal. And this goes back just as far as Crucifier, like to the very early 90s, late 80s. That he actually finally put out an album that does have Galal playing guitar on it. He's big on the death doom thing, especially when you hear him growl on some of this stuff. He sounds like fucking what's his name, Nick Holmes from Paradise Lost.
Nice.
On like their first and second albums. But this is a big this one's In Hircine Splendor. Not named after an Elder Scrolls god. I actually didn't know that. I thought Hircine was a word that fucking Todd Howard made up or something. But apparently it means of or relating to the domestic goat. And it makes sense when you read the lyrics, because it's about, fucking goats. Shout outs Impaled and Nazarene and whatnot.
Shout out to goats.
Shout out to goats. This is them doing the doom metal thing, which is a big part of Crucifier's overall concept.
I just kept listening to it.
I mean, it's one of those kind of songs.
It's interesting you were talking about Trouble, because when I first heard this track, what I immediately associated this track with was Autopsy. Some of the slower stuff from around the Mental Funeral area. Because that was
he's a big fan of Autopsy.
Oh, I'm sure.
I guess.
But Autopsy's an interesting band because they're like early Death Doom who are also still like really invested in Black Sabbath. Like there's still a lot of sort of bluesy pentatonic stuff that'll happen, and of course like big old Sabbath tritone shit. And it's interesting that that's maintained here, because I think now a lot of the throwback doom death that you hear, stuff that's not like Peaceville linked, is going to be more oppressive stuff, more like Winter or Dusk. You don't hear a lot of stuff maintaining that Sabbath feel, but it's really interesting that it's here.
Fucking love Dusk. Good band, actually. But yeah. There's a lot of weird, trouble-y, Sabbathy type stuff, and you could see why he would have this like side project Doom Death band, because this kind of shit is all over Crucifier. Not as much on this album as it was on the what's the other one? Thy Sulfur Thrown on High, the second one. That had a lot of it on there.
I'm glad you mentioned. Sorry, did you have anything more to say? I don't want to cut you off.
No, you're good. You're good. Sorry, I'm done.
No, I mean, you're our guest. You talk as much as you want. But what I was going to say, I mean, you'll have more to say to this anyway. What I was going to say, I'm glad you mentioned the Doom thing, because a big atmospheric factor in this record, right? It sounds like the kind of early 90s Hellenic black metal, mystic death metal, which is, I think Brandon Corsair came up with that term, cryptic death metal or mystic death metal, for like the first sort of, what's it called?
Like Thy Mighty Contract type shit?
Yeah, well, exactly, but also, like, there was Septic Flesh, we think of as a death metal band, but it's basically part of the same thing as Rotting Christ at the beginning. And
that's good. I'm going to start using that. Cryptic.
And like, if you listen to say the third Rotting Christ record, to Triarchy, or not
Triarchy of the Lost Lovers.
Triarchy of the Lost Lovers, yeah. That is that really sounds like almost a Solstice record. It sounds like it has those immense sort of romantic leads that are pretty slow for a black metal band that really sound like UK death doom and epic doom stuff from the Peaceville scene and beyond.
Yeah, that like that shit.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like that. I think Crucifier has that in spades on the more melodic and atmospheric parts of this record. Even the guitar tone is extremely cryptic. It has that sort of like crumbling fuzziness to it. And I think the focus on sort of like bold consonant riffs that are also really simple, that is very Thy Mighty Contract for sure. Right.
I didn't even think about this. There is, I don't even know if he's into any of that stuff, but there is an overlap with that sort of Hellenic black metal thing.
I mean, you got to think. I mean, the Galal is super into that, right? And the so I got to think he's into the Hellenic black metal thing, and also that just connects to the cooler stuff, the more death metal stuff out of the Peaceville scene. I feel like Rotting Christ, we're listening. Part of where that more epic heavy metal guitar sound comes from in the Hellenic stuff is, I think their paradigm for it was like Peaceville doom, death doom, like
real early Paradise Lost.
Yeah, Paradise Lost, early My Dying Bride. Those riffs aren't that, or the early Anathema. Anathema has a lot of shit like that.
That first Anathema album, that's some good shit.
Early in those first few of them, like the EPs and demos, are awesome too. But yeah, I feel like that vibe is all over this record, and you get it also on. None of us sampled the hit single, because you can go listen to this yourself. But like, if you're looking for sort of big, glorious USBM riffing, or Virginia scene riffing, the closest you're going to get is "Serenaded by the Angels" Shrills. And that sort of unfolds like a Triarchy of the Lost Lovers.
I almost added that one just
thing.
for the Scream sample they use in that. I swear to God, I heard it in like Time Splitters 2 or something.
Oh, dude, the Scream sample is there's a volume spike there. Yeah, if you're listening to this record while you might want to be careful if you're listening to this record while operating a forklift. we are back from privately discussing Spite Extreme Wing to publicly review our second full-length record of the night.
Spite Extreme Wing, a good band, actually.
Great band. The best band. But another good band is House of Atreus.
Are we going with this new House of Atreus as a full-length?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's longer than most Saint Vitus albums. I guess that works.
Yeah, they say it's a mini album, but it's obviously a full length.
It's like, over a half hour.
If it's so many bands are calling their records like full lengths when they're a half hour. Why not House of Atreus? Probably they were like, we have too much dignity to call this a full length. But fuck it, this is a complete musical statement.
I prefer a shorter full length, to be honest.
Shorter with more quality control, absolutely.
I mean, like the other day, like I've been playing through all of like the Mega Man games, and I went through Mega Man 3 the other day, and that shit is like, oh, you thought you beat Dr. Wily? Guess what? All 4 Robot Masters, 8 of them are back from Mega Man 2. Fight them again. I'm like, this game stinks.
All right. Well, Jiub, I barely got to introduce the band. This is House of Atreus Orations on Iron Bonehead. And we are back to talk about a band that is near to me and Jiub's hearts. The death metal guy is not as familiar.
What the fuck is an Atreus?
I mean,
it's where you have to wait.
I did graduate with honors as a classics major. Do you want a real explanation of who Atreus is?
Nah.
So this is their third full length, which we're gonna call it a full length.
I'm okay with that because I actually like this a lot more than their second album, to be honest.
Okay, interesting. So So this is a band that I've been waiting to review basically since we started this show. And in fact, the first outro I think we ever did for Terminus was Oath of the Horatii, which is
good
from
song,
their second.
Actually. Great
song. From their second album, From the Madness of Ixion. And named after a sick Jacques-Louis David painting. House of Atreus is, for those unfamiliar, basically the original band thoroughly inspired by Arghoslentian.
Yes.
You could say Svolder was also there pretty early.
Yeah, but House of Atreus fucking kicks those guys' ass.
Absolutely. And they have more of the sort of glorious melodicism.
They got more of their own style than Listen, I know everybody keeps telling you should do a Svolder episode. What am I going to say? Wow, this sounds like Arghoslentian, but not as good. Okay, cool.
Yeah, so to me, I would say House of Atreus is head and shoulders above all the Arghoslentian worship bands, all the others. And there's a huge crop of them that have come out in the last few years. And
did you hear Usurper? What the hell was that?
That was bad. That just sounded like Sacramentum without the Sacramentum.
Listen, I love that Rib Fader guy because he put King Cobra JFS on the cover of one of his demos, but I was not feeling Usurper at all.
Yeah,
Dungeon Serpent's a little better, but still not as good.
Dungeon Serpent is explicitly spun as like a sanitized alternative. So,
it is.
Fuck that.
Honestly,
right?
What's the one that's on Drakkar Grenadier? That struck me a little bit.
Yeah, I could not get into.
I like the.
If it's on Drakkar, it's got to be less sanitized. But
just a little bit though.
But I couldn't get into it. It was too It was too much of the sort of. You take the sort of elaborate consonant riffing from Arghoslentian and you make that the entire show, and you've got the.
Talk about sanitization. I remember when House of Atreus came out, like that accusation was leveled at them, the Arghoslentian situation. But like the fucking this Orations album's got the phrase "mud people" on it at one point.
Jesus, it's Yeah, well, I guess maybe the lyrics are more Arghoslentian than they have been in the past. They're certainly more present-oriented. These lyrics...
I kind of like their lyrics a little bit better than Arghoslentian's. Don't tell Holocausto I said that.
Their old stuff was more sort of ancient mythology and sort of referencing, whereas the new stuff seems more sort of combative and present-day.
I feel like they're transposing that sort of Greek shit into a modern context.
Yeah, for sure.
Philosophy-wise.
For sure. Yeah, Yeah, so the glorious Homeric ethos and all that. So, what raises them above the other Arghoslent bands? Well, I think it would be a couple things. One, they have mastered the most eccentric aspects of the Arghoslent sound. So all of those sort of crazy triple time flam riffs, all the aspects of the sound that come from Running Wild.
They literally
nailed,
cover Running Wild on this album.
Yes, it's a great cover at the end of the record. They get also a lot of the sort of off-kilter but really heavy rhythmic stuff, basically, they pick up on from Arghoslent. From the last record, I loved Call to Thee Concubines, which just had the most crushing, sort of lurching rhythm to it. Like extra bar stuff that I couldn't decipher. But carrying it beyond that, right, they also sort of insist on the roots of this music in brutal death thrash, in the kind of stuff that we just heard all over the Crucifier record. I feel like in the past that's been both a thing that sets House of Atreus apart, but is also at times their Achilles heel. Like, so, Jiub, you were saying you were not a huge fan of From the Madness of Ixion.
I mean, it's good. I think it came out at a time where I wasn't paying as much attention to a lot of new music, and I was a big fan of the Spear and the Ichor that follows, and like, I got so much shit for being into that album that it almost like, I don't know. Don't ever listen to other people.
Yeah, so, like, to me, Madness of Ixion had these amazing tracks on it, like the ones I've mentioned, right? Call to Thee,
Yeah,
Oath
Call
of
to
the
Thee
Horatii,
Concubines is definitely a standout.
Cordelia. Really, those three also are in a row, so that middle of the record is just insane. However, it also had this, like, sort of big, thick kind of Ares Kingdom tone to it that was cool, but a lot of the tracks had this kind of labored thrash into them, like kind of like we gotta eat our vegetables first before we get to the big riffs. So you have to work through this long series of not very interesting sort of dissonant thrash riffs before you hit the big melodies. And so I feel like there's all sorts of robust thrashing on this new one, Orations, but it's a lot better integrated with the more melodic and sort of expressive aspects of the sound.
Which, to be honest, is what people that listen to House of Atreus and Arghoslentian are here for.
Yeah,
if they don't want to admit it to themselves.
Yeah. So you were a huge fan of this band from the demo?
I think it was a demo. What was it? Into the Brazen Bull or something? Mm-hmm. It was whatever the 2013 thing was.
Yeah, it's that was Into the Brazen Bull.
Yeah, no, I got into them with that because at the time there weren't too many bands that were doing what Arghoslentian was doing at the time.
Yeah,
I really like that first album, Spear and the Ichor that follows, which actually came out on, of all labels, Dark Descent Records. Now both of the bands we're covering today, House of Atreus and Crucifier, are on Iron Bonehead, which is probably a better fit for them.
That's crazy. I didn't even realize that, but that makes sense.
That was a Dark Descent album. It was probably apart from the Time Ghoul demo comp, it was probably my favorite Dark Descent thing they ever put out.
Yeah, it sounds the least Dark Descent.
I don't know how they ended up on that label. Like, that's really weird. That doesn't sound like something that Matt would have put out, but it happened.
I feel like of the old Black Death labels, House of Atreus could have fit on the very early Invictus roster, but not anymore. Yeah.
Either early Invictus or later Nuclear War Now when he's putting out shit like Mona to Zethbeth and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, so Jiub, as a longtime fan, what do you think of Orations?
You know, I hadn't listened to it until you contacted me, and what was that, like a few weeks ago?
Mm-hmm.
I've played it probably once a day since then, and I thought it was really good. I actually, I wasn't huge on Madness of Ixion compared to Spear and the Ichor that follows. I feel like I had like an emotional connection to that album or something. It's pretty gay. But Orations, This is a good fucking album. The Running Wild cover is actually probably my least favorite part because I don't like the what would you call it, like sing growling, like the sentence.
Oh, I kind of like that.
See, I wish I could get into that because I really like Sentence Amok. I like a lot of albums that have that on there, but I wasn't huge on that on this album. But like, you know, at the same time, that's not even their song, and the rest of the songs in this, and this might be some of the best shit they've ever done. I've been a big fan. Also, another weird thing that happened with this band, back on the Into the Brazen Bold days, this was actually reviewed positively by one Brett Stevens from deathmetal.org.
Ooh.
But I'm pretty sure he would not like anything they're doing nowadays.
And that's interesting. You know, so coming into this myself, like not knowing House of Atreus at all, apart from, you know, the black metal guy pretty consistently singing their praises, I guess I was sort of surprised by, like, yeah, this sounds like Arghoslentian kind of, but like not really at the end of the day. This is in many ways just a much more straight up melodeath record than I anticipated. Like, yeah, there's a lot more just like early In Flames DNA on this than I would have fucking thought.
I would say that they're sort of similar to Crucifier in that they bridge more normal aspects of the extreme metal scene with the Arghoslentian shit. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Like, there's a lot of Hellenic black metal, and not just because they sing about fucking, you know, old Greek plays or whatever, but there's a lot of that in there. There's a lot of melodeathy type stuff in there. You could tell these guys listen to way more second wave black metal than anybody in Arghoslentian does. I'm pretty sure those guys only listen to Negative Approach and Iron Maiden.
Well, yeah, this is in many ways like much more streamlined and immediate than just about anything Arghoslentian has done. Yeah. I sort of like half jokingly but half seriously in the notes described this as like the children of bodemification of Arghoslentian.
I thought that was a very good term to describe them.
Yeah, because like even a lot of the guitar playing, a lot of the sort of flashy lead stuff on this is very Alexi Laiho. This is a stripped down and more accessible in many ways take on the Arghoslentian formula, which also means that this is sort of like the Sargeistification of Arghoslentian. You know, this is, you know, Jiub, you and me were talking, and you sort of talked about it in this segment, about how a lot of Arghoslentian fans will deny that they're there for kind of the most sugary and epic and consonant kind of power metal riffs.
No, you're there for the part in the Incorrigible Bigotry instrumental where it goes dun and then like on the last note they hit the natural harmonic to make it really ring out. That's what people are there for, but they don't want to admit it to themselves.
And so House of Atreus, at least on this record, seems to be a band that's just like committed to that bit and like, what if we just give the people what they want? And apparently what happens when you give the people what you want is we cycle back to 90s Gothenburg in a lot of ways, but like the best parts of it before it became completely oversaturated and we just got like we got violently ill when we heard diminished riffs.
so you're talking post Sky Dancer, pre Gardenian.
Yeah, pretty much. You know, I'm thinking of like you know, sort of like maybe Lunar Strain through maybe Horacle.
Oh man, now you're speaking my lingo, Ring.
I'm thinking of maybe like a more straightforward Eucharist, you know, stuff like that.
Yeah, they're not.
I could actually see House of Eucharist. I could see on this for sure.
There's more than a bit of Eucharist. I don't know if these guys are into Eucharist, but there is an overlap. With
no, that makes sense, because that's like a very respectable Gothenburg band for serious metal people to like.
Yeah, that was, I mean, really a lot of the main Gothenburg riffs are kind of ripped off from Eucharist. There's even Storm of the Lightsbane riffs are ripped off from Eucharist.
Yeah.
100%.
So with that, let me get into the first sample here, which is really just kind of an I like the riff sample. So we'll listen to this, and then I'll talk a little bit about where Arghoslentian is present and where it's absent, because I think those are both worth noting. So listening to that, obviously we have the sort of like oblique quality of Arghoslent and the shared DNA of Running Wild in there with those furtive little speed metal licks. And some of Arghoslent's like latent American greasiness still comes through, but that's something that can also be attributed to just like forgotten things from melodeath past. Like I always go to Ill Disposed as being a great example of that, which is a band that traded heavily in like stock Gothenburg phrases, but with this like really powerful Americanized sense of groove that makes them like really special and unique.
You're talking like Something Rotten in the State of Denmark.
Yes, dude, that record, it fucking kills forever. But yeah, so in essence, this is a passage with like a ton of riffs that sound like Arghoslent until you remember the Gothenburg melodeath that like existed. That, you know, this whole wing of extreme metal that was like literally the preeminent, the dominant style for like a lot of years when all of us were, you know, sort of early high school or middle school for us. Like that was like the peak interest of extreme metal at the time. And now it's weirdly forgotten. Gothenburg has all but disappeared in the modern zeitgeist. So
hey, can we get like a Sweet Death style revival of that?
I mean, yeah, you've got it. It's right here. I think that like literally what they're doing is they're going back through a lot of the old Gothenburg CDs and they're like, hey, why did we stop thinking this stuff was cool? Like, look at the
I can
solo.
tell you why they stopped thinking that shit was cool. Because Killswitch Engage started doing it, making it suck ass.
Well, yeah, definitely the metalcore band's bringing it in, but then it was also just a matter of market oversaturation.
I mean, the Gothenburg bands made it suck too. I mean, I can't listen to like every 5 years I'm drunk and I try to listen to the Jester Race. I can't even make it.
Oh, come on. Just a good album.
Yeah, I mean, the main riff on the main song is real sick. It's very sick. But, like, there were problems with the Gothenburg formula. I think we can all agree.
Well, certainly.
I mean, that shit did get pretty corny after a time.
Yes. Yeah.
But a band like House of Atreus is able to recognize the best parts of it and revitalize them in a way that I think is really cool.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm sure these guys like Slaughter of the Soul. I mean, what red-blooded man does not like Slaughter of the Soul?
That's all right.
Oh, are you one of those? Are you?
Oh, we're gonna have to finish this after the podcast.
But well, how about the black metal guy? What have you got?
Yeah, that sample was awesome. I really like the bluesy, the sort of like whole step hammer-ons at the end, right? That always gets me. But
I like the sweeps. I like how they're doing sweeps and making them sound cool for the first time in 15 years.
Yeah, the sweeps are
because
sick
they're
too.
not in the middle of a Rings of Saturn song where it's just them spazzing out.
All right, so this highlights, I guess, the more gritty undertone of House of Atreus.
This highlights I wanted to pick something out of this song, and you already took it, you jerk.
Yeah, so this is track 4, Morphos of Degeneration.
Best song on the album.
It's great.
It's a banger.
It is a banger, and yet it has almost none of the things that people would expect from a band working in this tradition. It has almost none of the...
It is the least slenty of this Arghoslent style band.
It refuses to give you the slant. So
You're
let's
not
listen.
getting a lot of slant with this album. You're getting a lot of... you hear what you get a lot of.
fucking guitar solo rips over the breakdown. This is like
wacky little solo at the end there, huh?
This is like Slayercore, All Out War, early 2000s, Belgian hardcore. This track is.
I didn't think of that when you put this on there. The way, especially that like this gave me a lot of when I say that they're a bridge band between more normal extreme metal and then like whatever Arghoslentian is.
Mm-hmm.
I was getting a big Covenant era Morbid Angel at its most retarded era vibe.
That is interesting. I can see it in a weird way. Yeah, like the breakdown structure on the Lion's Den.
The blast riff is the blast riff at the end is very Morbid Angel. I can hear that for sure. I can hear, but like this has a two-step on it. I mean,
it sure does.
Like, I mean, yeah, they do that kind of that breakdown thing with the flyaway leads, and then we just I mean, and then another breakdown, another two-step, and then they're doing this crazy shit where it sounds like the Archgoat half blast, but what they're actually doing is a full blast beat with the guitar playing quarter notes. Just jud. That's crushing. That's like a European beatdown band blasting. That's like Deformity or something.
Yeah, it's like one of those like weird like Italian straight edge bands.
Yeah, like Europe, basically the most militant. The straight edge bands so militant they go all the way around the horseshoe, basically. Usually without realizing it. But they had that intolerant European straight edge vibe. Archangel, right? Archangel with a K. Any of that. It reminds me a lot of that, but it also reminds me of like, some of the most crazy moments on the latest Diocletian record, which we reviewed last week. In a sense, this track is like a war metal track in that it's extremely gritty, sort of primitive death metal. But there are all these hardcore-isms in it that you almost never get in war metal, and that I wish we would hear more of.
Maybe this is like the genre if they sounded like this.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it addresses some of the limitations of war metal, right? That there's a rhythmic thing that could be happening that isn't. But this is definitely some werewolf powerlifting music.
This was by far my favorite song on the album.
So what set it apart from the other more sort of melodic ones?
It sounds strange to say this about a band where like their whole thing is like they were the first band to sound like Arghoslent that wasn't called Arghoslent. It's the least Arghoslenti of all the songs.
Yeah, for sure.
So
I hear a lot of like the weird Covenant, maybe even Blessed Are the Sick era Morbid Angel, and how they bend those single notes out like the burner. It's hard to explain.
No, so I mean, well, it's interesting because like House of Atreus is like a band that starts as like Arghoslent core and then sort of gets better the more they stray from that format.
Yeah, like my favorite before I heard this is probably my favorite thing they've ever put out was this little EP, or I guess we're calling it a full length. I'm okay with calling it a full length. My favorite moments on the first House of Atreus album that had stuck out to me sounded like Arch Enemy before the chick started singing.
Yeah, so like Bridges Burnt and Black Earth and shit.
Yeah. So I really like when like I like that they're by far the best like Arghoslenti sounding band, but they get even better when they're like. I love Arghoslent. I even love their new album. All right, like I'm a giant fan.
Whoa.
And I recognize I'm the only asshole out there that authentically enjoys that new piece of crap, and it still kind of worries me. I keep listening to it every day to find something to hate about it, and it hasn't happened yet. But Arghoslent is way too self-conscious to record a song like this, if that makes sense.
That's interesting. Yeah, I get that though.
Like they never would have like done that level of weird. Like bro down straight edge Dago hardcore shit. Like I don't know. This is a good fucking song. I like it.
Well, after we stole all of your intended samples from you, what have you got for us?
Oh shit! I don't even remember which one did I do here. Oh, Cathedral Ancestry. Wow, what a fucking title, huh?
That's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think this is the one where they said something about mud people in it, too. It was pretty based.
I think it's
this one was it actually had like an interesting sort of lyrical concept that wasn't about exactly what you'd think it would be about when I say that, but I'm going to pick out that part because it makes me laugh. This was Cathedral of Ancestry. What did I do? Like 208? Yeah, let's go ahead. Damn, is that already almost over? Shit.
We can keep going if you want.
Nah, that's all right. I picked out that thing for some reason.
Well, I
think
think what you're picking out is just like the sort of like underlying secret of Arghoslent, which is that they are just kind of the most extreme U.S. power metal band.
Yeah. Like not even like 80s Fates Warning, maybe even damn it, I'm brain farting. Liege Lord, a little bit of Liege Lord there.
Yeah.
I don't know, something about like the way the melodies are like they're like stop start. They're almost kind of choked off. Like it's always da 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 stop da 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 stop da 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 stop.
Well,
it's very riff based.
That's the kind of rhythmic punctuation that basically doesn't exist in black metal, right?
No,
and
black metal, and I love black metal for that.
Sure. And it only exists in certain kinds of death metal, but that's one of those things that that makes Arghoslent inimitable, that House of Atreus have successfully imitated. Basically, is like that sort of respect for these like separate, like clearly demarked phrases. Like that sort of rhythmic action.
Because like before people started getting really queer about the politics, everybody liked Arghoslent. Why? Like even like the more left wing people, they're into them because of quote unquote the riffs, you know?
Yeah.
And this is like the riffs dude type band. And this is like almost like the culmination of it.